Before we begin, I just want to say thank you all for coming today. We're super excited to have our History Social Science Judicial Series happening with our first guest speaker. I am Laura Guajardo, and I am the History, Social Science, and Civics Coordinator at Santa Clara County Office of Education. And with me, our special guest here today is Judge Julia Alloggiamento. You want to give us a wave? There she is. And she's going to be talking to us today about COVID-19, juvenile justice, and education, and hopefully trying to put a positive spin on what has been some trying times. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and just so you all know, we are recording the session today, so we will be able to share it later. And also, if you have your mic on, if you could please turn it off. And then we're going to move on to our next slide, which is here. Whoops, sorry. So we'd like to take a minute to, sorry, I have dogs. We would like to take a minute to kind of see who is with us today. So my daughter's carrying those kids off, those other kids. If you could please, because we have so many people, normally we'd go around and share out, but we can't really do that today. So if you could please take a moment and in the chat box, which is located, I believe on your screen at the bottom, tell us who you are, your position, where you're from, and then just give us one word to identify how you're feeling today, just so we can kind of see how everybody's doing. Now I'm wondering, let's see. So Judge Julia Alloggiamento says she's happy to be here. Cindy Brown from Sunol Community School. Oh, yes, we're all feeling sluggish. It is Monday. Thank you for coming. All right. Hello, Brittany. Brittany's kind of helping us out today. She works with Judge Julia. Hi, Ray. Oh, adjourn this. Oh, thank you for coming. Monday. That's a great word. Hi, Anthony, Alicia, Michelle. Oh, we've got quite a variety of people here today. This is exciting. Luz.
This is great.
Yeah, this is super exciting. All right. So again, if you're just joining on, if you could introduce yourself, your position, where you work, and how you're feeling today, and then give it about 30 more seconds. We still have people showing up. This is really, really exciting.
I recognize some of these names. I will say, as the presenter, it would be amazing if every time you were about to do a presentation, you knew how the room was feeling. So for all of you that are feeling like Monday and unmotivated, I hope to pull you right out of that. I'm going to try to keep the energy level high, but it's actually spectacular. Please put notes in the group chat. And in fact, I think it's a great way through this presentation. If you have any comments or questions, just to keep that going in the chat. I have my chat open so I can see that, and we'll try to save some time at the end for Q&A, and I'll try to keep track of the chat, the clock, and everything we're doing. But I guess we could probably go ahead and get started if you think that's all right.
Yeah, let's do it.
So before we play this, I want to set the tone. I did want to start with something that I hope is inspirational for all of you. You may recognize the last name, so I'll give a little shout out to my daughter. She created this. But I want to set the context of the reason I'm showing this. There's a couple different reasons I'm showing. The first is that this was actually an extra credit assignment. It's pre-COVID, but it was an extra credit assignment. You might have to stop it for a sec, pause it, yeah. That she had to do, and the teacher basically said, do anything you want on Antigone, which she had read, which I haven't, so I can't really talk too much about that, but it was about leadership, generally speaking. And this is what she came up with. And the reason I'm showing it is a couple. One, so the images are important but are going to be much more meaningful to me probably. I'm showing them to you as a little bit of a gift into my world. A lot of the images are actually my family members. You'll see pictures of my dad and my aunt who recently passed away, and my nephew and my kids when they were younger. It's not really the images that I want you to pay attention to, though. I really want you to listen to the words. A lot of the other images are about youth during marches, so like environmental marches, or I think maybe a few from the Women's March, I think mostly the environment. And really the whole point of it is talking about really leadership and new ideas. And although this was kind of a pre-COVID presentation that she did, it has even more meaning to me now, in that we really are forced at this time in our life to come up with some new ideas. And it's uncomfortable and it's crazy, but I think that the young people are actually doing that better than we are, and that's where we can find our inspiration. So I always find this inspirational, so I thought I'd just start with it, and I think you can go ahead and press play. Make sure you can hear it. We're not hearing it.
You could not hear it at all?
No, when you.
Okay, let's try it now. Let's see. Sorry about that.
Now.
So,
Oh.
okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. So when you go to your toolbar, Laura, if you go
Can you, it was playing now.
Yeah, it's going, Jenna.
Okay.
All right, here we go. I'll start it over. Third time's the charm.
Now, I don't know.
Now it's not playing.
Laura, you have to
You can't mute. Laura, if you could play it and not mute yourself.
Got it. Okay, start one more time. Sorry, everybody.
Now, I don't know that much about leadership. All I know is that as kids, we all wanted to be the Red Ranger. Now, if you don't understand the significance of being the Red Ranger, I feel very sorry for you. Because it means you were either born way too late to appreciate the birth of one of the world's greatest legacies, or you were born way too early to be born in one of the world's greatest centuries. For those of you who don't know, being the Red Ranger meant that you were part of an esteemed group of individuals known as the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now, as kids, we wanted to be the Red Ranger, because not being the Red Ranger not only meant that you got the biggest sword, the biggest Zord, and got to scream, "It's morphin' time," before every fight, but it also meant that you were the leader of the group. Now, as kids, we all wanted to be the Red Ranger. Well, actually, I wanted to be the Black Ranger for obvious reasons, but can we agree that as kids, we were unafraid to be Power Rangers, heroes, leaders? As a matter of fact, we were eager to be anything more than meager. So can we then agree that mediocrity, being average, is something that we learn? Not learn, but are taught. Maybe Socrates can expand more on this thought. What is leadership? He defined it as the challenge to be something more than average. Something we were willing to accept before life put us in the deep end. Because as we get older, it then starts to deepen. Most of us only want to be front in line to the pub or the club on the weekend. But is that our fault? Because from when I was young, I was told, "Sully, one day you're going to have to lead your own life." But this was then preceded by me being taught how to follow. In school, I learned to follow the rules. The first game we ever learned to play was follow the leader. I always had to make sure I understood the following. My boss always made sure I followed up on everything. My parents taught me how to follow the system, follow religion, follow tradition. And then they said they'll kill me if I ever followed in their footsteps. But the severity of this never really hit home, because even in my favorite TV show, Dorothy told me to follow the yellow brick road. Ironically, one thing I was never taught to follow was my heart. It was like follow fashion before you follow passion. So you can understand why my mum seemed bitter when I told her I wanted to be in a band, especially as I explained that I wanted to be the lead singer. Also, I couldn't sing. But the world doesn't need new leaders, because leaders come and go like common codes. If you ask me, the next leader should be a community guided by a common goal, one which everyone can contribute, young and old. I never understood why you had to be 18 to vote, because that's way too late to clean up the mess made by the previous generation. The world doesn't need new leaders. The world needs new ideas. Ideas that tell me I don't have to walk like that or talk like this, that me and you can be different. Because listen to this, and this is wisdom. People die, but ideas live forever. Because great ideas are all the greatest leaders ever were. If you look at it, Abraham Lincoln, equality. Julius Caesar, strength. Mahatma Gandhi, peace. Nelson Mandela, unity. Princess Diana, empathy. Mother Teresa, compassion. And I'm not saying I agree with all their actions, but I agree with the ideas. Maybe the scariest reality is that we are all leaders, because we all have ideas, but somewhere in between our adult lives and 9 to 5s, we're pacified to believe that we're satisfied. When deep down inside you, there's a Red Ranger, fully suited up, ready to swing at whatever life throws up. Don't get distracted by the noise the world throws to blind you, because deep down, there is a voice inside you, wondering why you haven't spoken to it in years. Because you know what I realize? We don't always get wiser with age. Society just breeds us to forget or remember things that we already knew were true in the first place. There's not that much more I need to say. Just that you be red tomorrow and let me be green today. And we can change the world either way, as long as we're unafraid to make mistakes and keen to play. And then you can see, as long as we stop looking for others to lead the way, that creating a better world is a piece of cake. We don't need leaders, we need ideas. Thank you very much.
All right, hopefully we can jump out of that.
Sorry. All right.
So if we can, I really just like that. The spoken word especially is very, very meaningful to me during this time, because I think that depending on kind of where you came from and how long you've been doing your work, sometimes we get used to doing the things we've done because it's always been done that way, and court falls into that. And all of a sudden COVID-19 happens, and we were all forced to just immediately jump to really chaos and trauma all in one day, and plan at the same time that we were continuing doing. And I really do feel like you probably have the same sensation for educators out there. I'm going to say that the 2 first days that we went into shelter in place were probably the 2 worst days I've had in court, and I've been a judge for 10 years. And I tell you that really not, woe is me, but a little bit more just hopefully, because I imagine that all of you, with schools sort of shutting down pretty immediately and having to figure that all out, and some people who are more technologically challenged than others being forced to figure that out, it was a little bit chaotic. For court, I'm in the Juvenile Justice Division, and it was very scary for everybody coming in. It was hard for kids coming into court and their family members, and unfortunately we had a plan in place, but we had not gotten a chance to implement it yet. And so those first 2 days were really the normal court schedule. We went down to 1 courtroom, but we had 3 courtrooms full of cases on, and I was the lucky chosen one to handle those days. And tensions were high, and people were scared, and no one knew whether it was right or wrong to put a kid in custody for safety reasons, for their own safety reasons, for the safety of the community. And so it was a really challenging couple days. And really what we all had to do, I think, was step back and realize that what we were doing was sort of triage. Like we were just trying to maintain for the first few days. Things got better. We as a court had to go down to our essential functions. And what that meant was we began with just handling those matters where youth were in custody, because of course we had to decide, do you put a youth in custody? You put a kid in custody during this really challenging time. And I'm sure for some people that the natural answer might be, of course not. I mean, it's COVID and people are sheltering in place and they should be home with their families. But for some of these youth, they might not have a family, or their family life might not be where you want to send them home to. So the issues were very, very complex. It also is complex when you have a minor who's a runaway type of a minor, because as we know, I'm never going to keep a kid in custody because of this, but there is that concern that if a kid's a runaway and they're not sheltering in place, they're out there exposing potentially other people or getting exposed. And so all of those decisions were hard. I raise it really just to say we did create a plan. Things kind of slowed down a little bit. For the first month and a half or so, we ended up just hearing, like I said, the in custodies. We created a plan, and now this month we have opened up more to out of custody hearings, and we were able to set things in place and do that remotely. And I raise all this just because I think you've probably been on the same journey in terms of schools kind of pretty immediately shutting down and then trying to relearn it, right? Figure out a way that you can teach and do what you do remotely. For us, I will say the feel of court is really, really different. In the beginning, we have every step of the way tried to follow public health, but in the beginning, masks were not required. There came a period of time they became required, and we thought, well, should we do that or not do that? And we, as the court, decided, let's do it. We will be, I thought it was important for the judge to wear it, even though we're usually about 6 feet away from everybody, but to normalize it. So those were some of the immediate changes that we had to make. But having kids come to court in masks, having kids appear on a telephone where I can't read them, having people see me, but I'm wearing a mask and they can't tell if I'm angry or smiling. All of those things are really hard for the kids we're serving, and I think hard for the process. So I just kind of want to put that by way of background. Maybe we go to the next slide. We talked about this being kind of a discussion. And again, we have so many people on. I don't know how you best want to do this, but like I said, I feel that this is probably a similar process for you, and that it probably, I know just for my kids who are student learning, that they, feel different in terms of teaching and learning in that method, and I know you're all going through it. Laura, I didn't know if you want to open it up for discussion or if I should go through some of the slides and then we can talk about the discussion.
I was just asking if anyone would like to respond to that. That would be great. There's a weird echo. So how do you see comparison of the effect of COVID-19 to force changes to the way you had to immediately conceive of a new process for teaching? How did the new style affect the feel of the classroom? So obviously we were remote, right? So how did that feel? We just want to kind of have you throw out some of the initial changes that you had to make and how it felt. Am I frozen? Because I see.
No, well, I can hear you.
Okay. Let's see. Dang, technical difficulties. Anyways, so if anyone would, maybe we can hear from like one or two people to share out really quick. Would anyone like to share? You can go ahead and unmute. I know, oh, I hear someone unmuting. I know for me in the, Olivia says it felt like a lot of work and like I was having to take risks. Yes, I agree with Olivia very much. It was at the County Office of Ed. She's also a coordinator, Olivia is. And we're just really trying to support the community and teachers and trying to stay like 5-10 steps ahead of what everybody else is doing so that we can support them. It's been very, very challenging, and having to change everything to this remote process. It's a learning process. Obviously, we're still learning and trying to perfect everything. Like I want to reboot myself from frozen on the screen there, but I don't want to lose everybody. So I'll just.
Well, why don't we do this? Maybe people can share out in the group chat like Olivia did. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And I'm going to continue on because I know we have such a short time. I do want to leave time at the end for Q&A. So maybe we can just hop to the next slide. But if people want to continue room, it certainly helps me because I can see that and I can make comments, and I think everybody else. It is helpful, I think, to know that other people are going through the same things. But I didn't want to talk just about the negative. I actually wanted to talk about some of the powerful and positive things that are happening through this, because I know that that's actually what's helping me get through it all, is seeing some positive change. So, you know, some of the things that we had to do was we had to get rid of all of the hearings that we like to do, right? It does help the court to have a kid come in for review because I get to see them and feel, to check in with them, do a real check-in. And I'm sure it's like how you feel having a group of kids in your classroom. It's really different to see them on a screen, I would imagine, and not really be able to check in. But in some ways, other people have stepped up for us. I mean, that's maybe different for the court than schools. But I will say, like, probation has really done an amazing job. We can't have reviews, but they're really doing a good job trying to check in with the kids a little bit more. And it's had us kind of like rethink things, you know, that judges don't necessarily have to be the only ones checking in on the kids. And so, for example, if the kid's doing really well, does it make sense for them to be, you know, pulled out of a school day to come in just to hear the judge, you know, say, yeah, you're doing a good job, although we know reinforcement is good. So it is making us think about, like, when we kind of come back to full speed, whenever that might be, what it would look like, and forcing us to say, like, what is the best for the kids? What is the best way to, if they come into the juvenile justice system, to have that interaction, to get them, you know, rehabilitated or with resources and back out of the system altogether. But there's been some other really creative things I've seen. So public service work is a frequent thing that we ask people to do. And it's obviously really challenging to do right now. And I saw probation officers asking them to instead, like, write papers that are pretty reflective. And so one probation officer had his minor write something to the healthcare providers as kind of a first responder, and write something to grocery store clerks, and write a letter to his mom during this time, and really convey, you know, how they're feeling and like the gratitude behind it. And it was amazingly well written. I mean, it was just one of the best things I read. And I thought that exercise really forced that youth to sit back and think about it. That's something that we talk about a lot in class, and I'm sure, or in court, and I'm sure you guys see it too. It's hard sometimes to really be able to see if the youth are understanding everything that's going on right now, but it's a time in life where they are forced to realize their actions affect really the whole world. I know we have just a half an hour. It's going really quickly, so I'm going to say let's go on to the next slide. But as you're turning to the next slide, what I will say also is it forced more to happen outside of the courtroom. So for us, it means that attorneys had to interact with each other. They had to come to court prepared. They had to talk to their client before that day in court. And I thought that's all a really good thing. It's a good practice to come into, because then when they come in, that hearing was a lot more intimate. People were a lot more prepared, felt less sterile, right? It became a better courtroom experience. So that was a good thing. I see the slide. I actually want to answer some of these questions. I'm going to say this slide does, I want you to think about maybe some of the things that you've had to do and creative new assignments. And then I'm going to get to some of these questions that I see in there. Maybe we can go to my last slide, which is talking about really, I always feel like there's a lot of different agencies, different, I mean, I don't know if court's not really an agency, but different parts of the system or whatever that see kids and families in different ways, and that kind of goes to one of these questions. And someone may walk through court because they got arrested for a crime. They might be having troubles in their classroom, and so you're the first to see. I actually think educators are usually the first to see something. Sometimes it comes up in the medicine world because they're going in for a pediatric appointment and things come up. And it can be, so many different ways. Sometimes it's in our community-based organizations. And one of the things we talk about a lot in the juvenile justice system is trying to make those things all look and feel similar to families in a way that we're trying to help them, right? That even if you come into a juvenile justice courtroom, I have an obligation to do things that help protect the community as well, right? So if kids are doing out of control behavior, which I see someone's asking about. But what I really want to do is make sure I'm giving resources to the family so that that family unit can work together. And so I think that that's where I wanted the video to kind of give people some hope and some ideas. I think it would be an amazing and an ideal world if our leadership was really a community guided by a common goal. And I think when we're talking about kids, we really do have that common goal. Everybody is served if they have, an education and are not committing crimes and are dealing with trauma that they may have and are getting the resources their family needs to move forward. And that's something we want to continue to work with. Hi, Lynn, nice to see you. So there was a question in here about not having behavior support at home and having students lash out at their parents. Should police be called every time a student is out of control? Super hard answer for me to give, but generally I would say that because of COVID-19, what kids are brought into court for is changing. People recognize that to be an exposure, and so we're trying to have things dealt with more in the community, and we want that to happen anyway, but police should be called if someone feels unsafe. If someone's threatening someone, that type of behavior certainly should be addressed. But if it is conflict within the home, what one would hope is that that a resource could be called, right? And I know schools don't always have all the connections to that, but that either through community-based resources or something else that we have, if the minor happens to be on probation, maybe connecting with the probation officer, but not to necessarily mean they're going to be hauled in, but so that we can provide some support and services through that. So I know that's not a super great answer, but it's a quick answer to that. So I know we went so fast. I know that video was like 5 minutes, but I didn't really get a chance to say this, but the last point I will say, well, I think we deal with all the same kids. I have tried really hard as a juvenile judge to actually go and talk to kids like at the youth, I'm forgetting, it's YAC, Youth Advisory Council. I was forgetting the acronym for a minute. And ask them kind of what worked for them in court. And it's really interesting that there's really a variety. I will say that, like, out of the same meeting, one kid said to me, you know what I think you should do? I think you should kind of, like, almost the scared straight thing. You should show them what life is like if they don't get out of the system, they go to prison. That was a young man had said that to me. And sitting right next to him was a young woman who said, no, I think you should show them like a pathway to college, and you should show them what they could be, right? Not what's, the most negative thing. I tend to actually think showing them the positive path is a better thing, but still coming from kids who had two different things. What all of them said, though, is they always do want to be heard. They want to feel like someone cares. And that's something that hopefully we all can do, right? Show compassion, show them that we care. And since I only have a minute, I'll say that all of that, though, wears on all of us, too. I know I feel it. I'm certain teachers feel it. So don't forget to show yourself some compassion, too, and do self-care during this time, because it's super, super important. So we have like maybe 30 seconds for other questions.
If you're willing, we can go over a couple minutes, because
I'm happy to stay and willing. So if anybody has questions or comments, that went way quicker than I expected. And so I'm not sure I even got everything out, but I'm really thankful that you took a minute to join us today.
I was hoping that folks in the chat could share out to everyone maybe some, the last question here was what skills you learned from others or your students, or even in the last question was, what are some ways that we could connect virtually? Because I know that is really, really hard right now. So if people wanted to throw out some of their ideas in the chat to share, maybe that'll spark some ideas for other folks so that we can use that in the future. And then also, Judge, I was wondering, when we spoke before, you talked about, just really quick, if you could tell us, or if you're willing to share, about, excuse me, some of the new ways that you were, one of like your probation officers, you told me, was having a new way to have the juvenile show, do their public service or their community service. And I thought,
right, I touched on that just briefly. People are getting more creative. So one probation officer did have them do kind of a writing sample. There was another probation officer who worked with his youth to say at home, maybe doing some chores that would not be normal chores for them. But different creative ways. And what I really found from it, for me, is those ones that are more reflective for the youth is really powerful for them. I think that, kids today, they're going to be our historians of this time, right? In a really different way than we're feeling it. And so being able to provide the forum for them to do that, which is again why I showed that video in the beginning, was, sometimes all it takes is someone saying, hey, here's a topic and here's a forum, and do it any way you want to do it. It wasn't do a video. That was just my daughter's way of doing it, but it was just take a concept and then do that. And I try to do that in court myself. I have kids who sometimes, I know they're interested in music, and maybe they'll write me a rap song, usually clean. But trying to find different ways. I saw the equity question came up, and remote access, and that, is a huge issue, obviously, for the courts as well. There are people who are can only appear by phone because, they're not going to have a computer access. But there's a lot of work in that area too, trying to make sure that people in some way or another have some access. I loved this comment about offering choices too. Yeah, I think that that's exactly right. We want our youth to feel like they have a say in it and a choice in it, and decision making in it.
all right. I went to the next slide. Does anyone have any last comments before we close out here today? Again, I want to thank you, Judge Judge A.
That's okay.
Tongue twister that name. I want to thank you so much for taking the time and being here and sharing your thoughts and what's going on at the court with us. We will be sure to share this with folks, and hopefully they can get some insight that really, I love your last food for thought here, that at-risk youth are looking for someone who listens, cares, is compassionate, and explains. I think that is so important. I think, one more thing. Jenna just posted, thank you. Love that you bring up youth creativity coming out through their passions. Yeah, that's so important. Like offering choice, letting them do things. It's so important. All right, so thank you. And I just
there is the one last question. It looks like working with school districts when the student does not have technology. I'm just going to answer that from a court perspective. There is a lot of work being definitely through the SCCOE. I will say that the court's involvement in connecting kids to technology usually comes a little bit more, and it's not really the court as much as it is probation, but for our youth, because they are part of County Office of Ed, they will usually get connected up with resources if they're transitioning, for example, from schooling in the home or schooling at the ranch. So if it's a kid who has been in custody, so that there is a continuum of care. So we are working on that. I know that that's a small proportion of the kids out there who really need it. And it looks like Desiree is saying that they're working on that as well. So that's a good resource. Last thing I will do as a shout out is, I am also chair of our court community outreach committee, and we do a lot of work with youth. We have some programs for young women, a young women's power lunch. This year was going to be our first program called Color of Justice. We really want to do outreach to youth, and we of course are re-envisioning what that looks like for the immediate future, because we used to do a lot of bringing people to court. But if you you personally have youth that you would like some outreach to. I know Brittany's on this as well, but my contact information is on here. We're looking again for new ideas and ways to connect with youth, and happy to do that. And we'll try to share out some of the outreach that we're already doing for educators and your students as we can. So wanted to plug that as well.
Thank you again for coming. And one last thing, we have episode 2 of our series with Judge Roberta Hayashi, and she's going to be talking about Fred Korematsu civil rights cases and implications today. And she will be providing a link to free curriculum that teachers can use in their classrooms. So this will be on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So please come back. We would love to have all of you. And I see that people are sharing lots of stuff in the chat too. So we'll be sure to save the chat with that information. And again, thank you for coming. And I hope everybody has a lovely rest of their Monday.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.